November of '44, somewhere over Czechoslovakia. You ever hear about Bruce Carr? Hell of a pilot, hell of a story. I knew guys who flew with him, good men, the kind who'd follow you straight into hell if you asked nicely. Let me tell you what that boy did, because it's the kind of crazy that makes my story look downright sensible. It was early November. Bruce was up there in his P-51 leading a strafing run on some German airfield. Then bang, flak hit him. 80mm shell fragment punched right through his engine, severed the oil line. Now you got to understand, without oil that Merlin engine's got maybe 90 seconds before it seizes up completely. After that you're not flying, you're falling. With style maybe, but you're still falling. Bruce did what any sane pilot would do. He bailed out, popped the canopy, rolled that dying Mustang upside down, and dropped into the sky. At 8,000 feet, his chute opened. Beautiful sight, I'm sure, except for one little problem. He was 200 miles behind German lines, no radio, no weapon except a .45 with 7 rounds, no food, no water. November in Czechoslovakia, cold as a witch's heart. Freezing every night. The math wasn't good. American pilots shot down over enemy territory, 23% make it back. The rest, Stalag Luft III if they're lucky, unmarked graves if they're not. Bruce Carr was about to beat every damn statistic they ever wrote about downed pilots. Now Bruce wasn't some rookie. Kid was born in Union Springs, New York back in '24. Farm country. Nothing special about his childhood except one thing. At 15 years old, he learned to fly, not in some military program, not at some fancy school. A crop duster named Earl let the kid take the controls of his biplane one summer afternoon. Bruce was hooked. By 16, he had more stick time than most Army Air Force cadets. September '42, he enlisted, 18 years old. Turned out his instructor was Earl, same guy who taught him to fly 3 years earlier. Earl took one look at Bruce's 240 flight hours and pushed him into the accelerated program. By August '43, Bruce was a flight officer. By February '44, he was in England flying P-51 Mustangs with the 380th Fighter Squadron, the P-51. God, what a machine. Range of 1,650 miles with drop tanks, top speed 437 miles per hour, 650 caliber Brownings, enough firepower to shred a German bomber in 2 seconds. Bruce called his plane Angel's Playmate. Fitting name. He had no idea that in 8 months he'd be sitting in a very different cockpit, one with German labels and a swastika on the tail. March of '44, Bruce got his first kill. Spotted a Messerschmitt Bf-109 over Germany and gave chase. The German pilot tried to escape by diving for the deck, flying just above the treetops. Bruce followed. 40 miles at over 400 miles per hour. Both planes barely clearing the German forests. Bruce fired, missed, fired again, clipped the 109's left wing. The German panicked, pulled up, ejected, but he was too low. His chute didn't fully deploy, hit the ground at 60 miles per hour. Bruce came back expecting congratulations. Instead, his CO called him into the office. Carr, that was the most over-aggressive flying I've ever witnessed. You nearly killed yourself chasing that German into the trees. You're being transferred. The kill didn't even count. Technically, Bruce didn't shoot the plane down. The pilot killed himself trying to escape. But that's Bruce Carr for you. Where others saw recklessness, he saw opportunity. Where others saw limits, he saw suggestions. By November 2nd, '44, Bruce had 7.5 confirmed kills. He was an ace. And then his luck ran out. He hit that frozen Czechoslovakian ground hard, twisted his ankle bad. Not broken, but close. He buried his parachute under leaves and started moving. The Germans would search for him. They always did. He had maybe 20 minutes. Now, most pilots would head south or west, toward Allied lines. That's what the Germans would expect. Bruce headed north, toward the enemy. His logic, they'd search outward from his landing site, assuming he was running away. They wouldn't expect him to move closer to their base, and if he was going to survive, he needed supplies. Food, water, maybe a weapon. The airfield had all three. Day 1. Bruce moved through the forest, staying off roads, traveling at night. His flight suit barely kept him warm. His ankle throbbed with every step. He hadn't eaten in 18 hours. Day 2. He found a stream, drank until his throat went numb. Spotted a German patrol 200 yards away and lay motionless in a ditch for 2 hours while they passed. Day 3. The hunger became unbearable. Bruce was burning 4,000 calories a day just staying warm. He'd consumed 0. His body was eating itself. He made a decision. Tomorrow he'd surrender. The Luftwaffe treated captured pilots better than the Wehrmacht or the SS. Aviators had a code. They respected fellow flyers, even enemy ones. Stalag Luft III was boring but survivable, 3 meals a day. Red Cross packages, letters from home. Better than starving to death in a forest. Day 4, late afternoon. Bruce reached the edge of the German airfield, positioned himself in a tree line overlooking the eastern perimeter. Through the branches he could see hangars, fuel trucks, aircraft, FW-190s mostly, a few Bf-109s. His plan? Wait until morning. Walk to the main gate with his hands up, but as darkness fell, Bruce noticed something. A revetment 80 yards from his position. A Focke-Wulf FW-190 sat inside, partially hidden by camouflage netting. 2 German mechanics were working on it under portable lights. Bruce watched. The mechanics checked the fuel, full tanks. They ran up the engine, that distinctive BMW 801 radial roaring to life. They cycled the propeller, checked the magnetos, ran through what looked like a complete pre-flight inspection. Then they shut it down, covered the cockpit, and walked back toward the hangars. The FW-190 was ready to fly. Bruce's brain started calculating. He'd never flown a German aircraft, didn't speak German, had no idea where the controls were or how the engine started, but he knew how to fly. Over 500 combat hours. Every aircraft has a throttle, a stick, and rudder pedals. The physics don't change because the labels are in German, and he was looking at a fully fueled fighter with no guard. The surrender plan evaporated. Bruce waited until 3 a.m. The airfield was quiet, skeleton crew on night watch. No activity near the revetment. He moved. 80 yards of open ground, no cover. If anyone looked his direction, he was dead. He made it in 40 seconds, his twisted ankle screaming with every step. The FW-190 was bigger than he expected. Wingspan 34 feet, length 29 feet, nearly a ton heavier than the P-51, the Focke-Wulf FW-190, Germany's premier fighter, first deployed in '41. Outclassed the Spitfire so badly the British rushed new variants just to compete. German pilots called it Würger, the butcher bird. Allied pilots called it trouble. Bruce climbed onto the wing. The canopy was unlocked. He slid it back and dropped into the cockpit. First thing he noticed, he couldn't read anything. Every label, every gauge, every switch was in German. Gothic script everywhere. Second thing, the cockpit was smaller than the P-51's. His knees pressed against the instrument panel. But the control stick fell naturally to his right hand, throttle on the left, same as American aircraft. Some things are universal. Bruce had maybe 4 hours until sunrise. He used every minute, traced wiring, identified gauges by position, airspeed usually top left, altimeter top center, engine instruments on the right, found the fuel selector. Magneto switches, propeller control. The starter was the critical piece. On the right side of the cockpit, he found a T-shaped handle with German text. Looked vaguely like starter. He pulled it. Nothing. Pushed it. A mechanical whine filled the cockpit. An inertia starter, winding up like a toy. He let it spin for 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Then he pulled the handle. The BMW 801 coughed, caught, roared to life. The noise was apocalyptic. 700 horsepower at idle sounds like thunder. Every German on that airfield heard it. Bruce had seconds. He shoved the throttle forward. The FW-190 lurched. The tail came up almost immediately. This thing was nose-heavy, eager to fly. Through the pre-dawn darkness, Bruce aimed between two hangars. Ground crew were emerging, shouting, pointing, 60 miles per hour, 70. The hangars rushed toward him. At 90 meters, Bruce pulled back on the stick. The FW-190 leaped into the air, clearing the hangar roofs by what felt like inches. He was airborne, in a stolen German fighter, 200 miles behind enemy lines. Now came the hard part. Landing gear. He found a lever, pulled it, satisfying thunk. Gear retracted, aircraft accelerated, compass. He oriented himself west-southwest, toward France, toward home, altitude. He climbed to 500 feet, then thought better of it. At altitude, he was visible to radar, to fighters, to anti-aircraft batteries. He dropped to treetop level, 50 feet above the ground, 280 miles per hour. The Czechoslovakian forest became a green blur beneath his wings. This was insane flying. One mistake, and he'd cartwheel through the trees at 300 miles, but at treetop level, invisible to radar, too low for flak, too fast for ground troops. The fuel gauge showed full tanks. The FW-190 had a range of about 500 miles. France was 200 miles away. He had margin for error. For 45 minutes, Bruce flew west. The sun rose behind him. The terrain changed from forest to farmland, to the scarred battlefields of eastern France. He crossed the front lines. That's when his problems really began. Allied anti-aircraft gunners saw what they expected to see. A German FW-190 flying low toward Allied positions. They opened fire. 50 caliber tracers arced toward Bruce from every direction. He was taking fire from his own side. No radio to announce himself. No way to signal he was friendly. The FW-190 still had German markings, black crosses on the wings, swastika on the tail. Bruce did the only thing he could, flew lower and faster, dropped to 20 feet, hedge-hopping. The propeller wash kicked up dust from the roads. French civilians dove into ditches. American soldiers fired rifles at him. Every gun in France was shooting at Bruce Carr. The FW-190 took hits. He could hear the impacts, feel the shudders. But that German engineering held. The aircraft kept flying. Ahead he recognized the airfield, A-66, Orcante, France, home of the 354th Fighter Group. He lined up for approach. No time for pattern work. No time for radio calls. The anti-aircraft batteries were already tracking him. That's when he discovered the final problem. The landing gear wouldn't come down. Bruce pulled the lever. Nothing. Pumped it. Nothing. Looked for a backup system, emergency release, anything. He didn't know the FW-190's landing gear operated on hydraulic pressure. Didn't know there was a selector valve. Didn't know he'd been pulling the wrong handle for 5 minutes. Below him, the 354th anti-aircraft crews were loading their 40mm Bofors guns. A German fighter was circling their field. They were preparing to blow him out of the sky. Bruce made a decision. He was going to belly land, lined up with the grass beside the main runway, lowered the flaps. That lever, at least, he'd figured out. Cut the throttle. The FW-190 sank, 100 feet, 50 feet, 20 feet, hit the grass at 90 miles, slid for 300 yards, threw up a rooster tail of mud and debris, ground to a stop. Bruce was alive. Within seconds, the FW-190 was surrounded. Military police, rifles raised, screaming at the pilot to get out. They were expecting a German. They were expecting a prisoner. The canopy slid back. A mud-splattered American in a torn flight suit climbed onto the wing. "I'm Captain Carr of this goddamn squadron." Nobody believed him. He'd been missing for 4 days, supposed to be dead or captured, and he just belly-landed a German fighter on their airfield. The MPs kept their rifles trained on him until a staff car arrived. Colonel George Bickle, commanding officer of the 354th, stepped out, looked at the scene. The destroyed FW-190, the mud-covered pilot, the bewildered MPs. "Where in the hell have you been?" Bickle said. "And what have you been doing now?" The story spread through the Army Air Forces like wildfire. The pilot who stole a German plane, the only American in the European theater to take off in a P-51 and return in an FW-190. But Bruce's war wasn't over. 5 months later, April 2nd, 1945, near Schweinfurt, Germany. First Lieutenant Carr was leading a flight of 4 P-51s on a reconnaissance mission. They were at 15,000 feet when Bruce spotted movement above them. German fighters, more than he could count. A massive formation stacked from 18,000 to 25,000 feet. Bruce did a quick estimate, 60 aircraft, maybe more. Bf-109s and FW-190s mixed, the largest concentration of German fighters he'd ever seen. He had 4 P-51s. Standard tactics? Immediate evasion. 4 against 60 is suicide. The Germans had altitude advantage, numerical advantage, positional advantage. Every manual ever written says disengage and report, get out alive. Bruce Carr had never been particularly interested in what the manual said. He keyed his radio. Engaging. His wingmen didn't hesitate. They'd flown with Bruce before. The 4 Mustangs climbed into the German formation. The Germans didn't expect an attack. They were flying loose defensive formation, conserving fuel, probably heading to intercept a bomber stream. 4 American fighters climbing directly into their midst made no tactical sense. Bruce used the confusion, slipped into the back of the formation, positioned himself behind a Bf-109, fired. The German pilot never saw him. The 109 exploded. Bruce shifted to another target, FW-190. 3 seconds of 50 caliber fire. The Focke-Wulf rolled inverted and plummeted. The German formation began to scatter. They didn't know how many Americans were attacking, didn't know where the fire was coming from. Bruce moved through them like a wolf through sheep. 3rd kill, 4th kill, 5th kill. In 3 minutes, First Lieutenant Bruce Carr shot down 5 German aircraft. His wingmen accounted for 10 more. 4 American pilots, 15 German aircraft destroyed. 0 American losses. When the ammunition ran out, Bruce led his flight home. The surviving Germans, 45 of them, scattered across the German countryside. April 9th, 1945, Bruce Carr was promoted to captain. The Distinguished Service Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor, was awarded for his actions on April 2nd. Bruce became the last ace in a day in the European theater of World War II. No American pilot matched that feat before Germany surrendered. By war's end, he'd flown 172 combat missions. 14 or 15 confirmed aerial victories, records differ, plus numerous ground kills. He was 21 years old. Bruce stayed in uniform, joined the Acrojets, America's first jet aerobatic team, flew F-80 Shooting Stars, then Korea, 57 combat missions in F-86 Sabres, commanded the 336th Fighter Interceptor Squadron, then Vietnam. Colonel Carr, now 44, flew 286 combat missions in F-100 Super Sabres, 3 wars, 3 aircraft generations, 515 combat missions total. He retired in 1973. April 25, 1998, St. Cloud, Florida. Bruce Ward Carr died of prostate cancer. He was 74 years old. They buried him at Arlington, Section 64, grave 6922. The headstone lists his rank. Colonel, United States Air Force, lists his decorations, Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Legion of Merit, Distinguished Flying Cross with clusters, Air Medal with clusters, Purple Heart, lists his wars, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. It doesn't mention the Focke-Wulf, doesn't mention the 4 days in the Czechoslovakian forest, doesn't mention the belly landing with no gear, the MPs pointing rifles at his face, the CO asking, Where the hell have you been? Some stories don't fit on headstones. You know what I learned from Bruce Carr's story? In November '44, that boy found himself alone, unarmed, stranded 200 miles behind enemy lines. The rational choice was surrender. The safe choice was giving up. Bruce chose differently. He looked at a German fighter covered in unfamiliar instruments and saw not an obstacle, but an opportunity. Climbed into a cockpit he'd never seen. Started an engine he'd never operated. Flew an aircraft he'd never touched. Not because he was reckless, because he refused to accept that his options were limited to the ones that seemed possible. 4 months later, faced with 60 enemy fighters and 4 friendly aircraft, he made the same calculation. The rational choice was retreat. The safe choice was survival. He chose attack. And 15 German pilots never made it home. In 1997, a year before he died, Colonel Carr flew one more time. Kermit Week's Fantasy of Flight Museum in Florida invited him for an air show. Bruce, now 73, arrived in a P-51 Mustang. Came in over the crowd at 300 knots, 50 feet off the deck. The same approach he'd used 50 years earlier, flying a stolen Focke-Wulf into a French airfield while his own side tried to shoot him down. Some things never change. The crowd watched a 73-year-old man throw a World War II fighter through maneuvers that would challenge pilots half his age, loops, rolls, high G turns. When he landed, someone asked what he was thinking up there. He shrugged. Same thing I was always thinking. What's the airplane capable of? What am I capable of? Let's find out. That's the Bruce Carr story. Not the stolen fighter. Not the 15 kills. Not the 3 wars and 5 and 15 combat missions. The story is simpler than that. The story is a pilot who looked at impossible odds and asked, what else can I do? Me? I made a different choice. I chose Danny, one life. Bruce chose the fight. I chose to save who I could. We both came home. We both lived long lives. We both carried ghosts. But that's war. It doesn't care about courage. It doesn't care about medals. It only cares about choices. And every choice costs something.